games in London for the second season in a row.
Shoot.
You think back to this time last year, the expectations were high for Trevor Lawrence entering last season. He led the Jaguars to a playoff win the year before. However, he did not take the leap that a lot of people expected him to. Lawrence and the Jags started the season 8-3. Then they lost 5 of their last 6 games and missed the playoffs completely. Lawrence finished the season with 21 touchdown passes and 14 interceptions. So, Dan, big year coming up for Trevor. Where does he need to improve if he's going to take that next leap we were thinking he was going to make last year?
Red zone offense. This was a team last year that it felt like on a weekly basis you would watch them play and be like, man, that throws literally a foot off, or that toe in the end zone is an inch off. Remember the Chiefs game early on, they had 3 plays that were just missed touchdowns. I think they were 21st in the NFL, so they got to be a lot better in the red zone. Number 2, stay healthy. This is a little bit specific to Trevor Lawrence. You know, he was one of the things that stood out about his game was he's running around last year, making plays with his feet finally, and then he had that knee injury, and that kind of hindered him a little bit, and obviously Christian Kirk going down. And then really with Christian Kirk and Ridley, I would say this. You realize the importance of Christian Kirk to the offense last year, and if we're being honest, him and Calvin Ridley never got on the page that they expected to. It worked at times, but it never became that dominant quarterback wide receiver duo that we expected. So to piggyback off that final point, like he's got to take that step with Gabe Davis or Brian Thomas Jr., who they drafted out of LSU. He needs to. You know who else needs him to is Doug Pederson. You know, like this is a big year for both those guys, and it's not going to happen if Trevor Lawrence doesn't take that jump with one of those wideouts.
Man,
Yeah. So I think everything Dan said was deadly accurate. I think there's a lot of undue hate and criticism towards Trevor Lawrence. I understand his career did not get off to the jump that maybe a lot of people are anticipated, right? I think a lot of people were anticipating like the beginning of a career of, say, like a CJ Stroud or even a Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, maybe, like people, because people were so high on Trevor Lawrence, right? He was like the next big thing, bona fide number 1. I mean, people knew that like years ago. They had to just like wait for him to be able to be eligible to be drafted, and it was just going to be like, you know, who's going to get him. And then he got off to this weird season because they made a terrible coaching hire, which just made everything all weird. And I mean, that got weird fast. And that's a tough thing for a rookie quarterback to kind of grow into. And then I think Doug Pederson was the great hire because Doug Pederson is loved by players, absolutely loved by players. He's clearly competent. I don't think Doug Pederson is necessarily this amazing offensive head coach. I think he's good, you know, but probably between like a good to great, probably like equivalent to like a Dak Prescott level quarterback, quite honestly, right? Like good to great, not elite, isn't going to come in there and outcoach anyone, but definitely not going to be a bum and doesn't know what he's doing. I think coaching is very much on a spectrum, just like players. You're going to have the Andy Reids of the world, and then the elite offensive minds like the Sean McVays and the Shanahans. And then you're going to have the ones that aren't as good, but a little bit more competent, probably need a little bit more help from a DC or OC standpoint, need a pretty decent team, can't just completely make nothing out of something like I think a McVay or a Shanahan or Reed can do. And then it just continues to get worse and worse and worse. And so I would put Pederson in the tier that's below the McVays and the Shanahans. He's not part of that party, you know, but still clearly good. Definitely not like on the level of like a Nat Hackett or, hey, we just got to fire this guy, which is why I think Pederson and Frank Reich were such a great combination together, because I think they really worked well, because I think Pederson is a great leader and a culture builder, and I think Frank Reich was able to kind of fine tune on the more small things, and I think Frank Reich might lack in the other leadership aspects of head coaching. So I really think them two together is what made the Eagles so successful back when they won the Super Bowl. So that's that aspect. Now, Trevor Lawrence also got injured. I don't know why people are not like okay with accepting this to be the truth, but the dude had like 4 injuries in 4 weeks. I mean, at the one injury, it looked like he was never going to like walk again, let alone play football the next week. I mean, it was outrageous. It was outrageous. So, and also once Kirk went down, that offense was nothing. There was nothing going on, which is something that Doug Pederson has had issues with in the past, especially with the Eagles, right? Like, I mean, there were so many times that you're watching, as soon as Frank Reich left the Philadelphia Eagles, everybody just said it was like universal that the offense just has it's just not imaginative anymore. It's not dynamic. There's what's going on. And that's when everyone started to get scared and said, man, was really all the offensive brains coming from Frank Reich and not Doug Pederson? And I think, again, I don't think Doug Pederson is super resilient at facing adversity in that regard. I think Doug Pederson is great when everything is humming and going well, right? But when, say, Kirk does go down, he didn't do much to then get Trevor Lawrence more comfortable in other aspects of his game, or building up other connections. And that's a problem. You can't be too reliant on just one receiver, because we see Kirk goes down, and you saw that as soon as Kirk went down, the offense just couldn't get anything going. It was just reminiscent of a sputtering engine, just tires just spinning in mud. That's what it felt like. And now you add Trevor Lawrence getting injured, and it's just like, well, what do you want? So I think Trevor Lawrence has gotten a lot of extra criticism, because he's the number one pick and people are expecting him to be so much better than he has been technically. But I really, really believe that Trevor Lawrence is indeed a great quarterback. I think if you give him a good team, he's healthy, a good offensive line, you give him some weapons to work with, he's going to succeed. I mean, we have to look at some of these other, I always just look at the other quarterbacks from the past who have had success, and then compare it to what some of these other quarterbacks that we're so critical of, and ask ourselves, have they had this? Has Trevor Lawrence had a coach like a Shanahan, a Sean McVay, an Andy Reid? Does he have weapons like a Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Christian McCaffrey, OBJ, Cooper Kupp? Like, you have to ask yourself those questions. And if the answer is no, then why are we expecting this player to be able to consistently ball out when we know those players who have succeeded, a big part why they're succeeding is also because of the people around them? I just think we always love to pick and choose when we want to say these other aspects influence the success of a quarterback. And it's like, when we want to elevate the quarterback, we say, oh, he doesn't need those weapons. Those weapons are nice, but everyone has weapons. And when we want to bring the quarterback down, we say, you gotta find a way. Real winners find a way. And you know how Tom Brady found a way? He said, get me Antonio Brown. Get me Gronk. Get me a good offensive line. That's what he did. And if people want to point and say Patrick Mahomes doesn't have a good offense, or he won last year and he didn't have a good offense, and again, that's false. Rashee Rice is a good receiver. Who knows if he's going to be playing this season? Travis Kelce is the greatest, or the second greatest tight end in the history of the NFL. They had the number one defense in the NFL, and they have Andy Reid. Like let's stop pretending like Patrick Mahomes just dragged a bunch of lawn chairs and tables, because it's just not what happened. So I just don't think that we should be putting all of this extra scrutiny. I mean, we can scrutinize Trevor Lawrence's game and point out his flaws and things that he needs to work on, but I just think the conversation surrounding Trevor Lawrence right now is, he's a bust, he's clearly not that good. And it's like, guys, what are we talking about here? I mean, he's had a rough start for a lot of reasons that were completely out of his control, and the team itself needs to get better. He's had unfortunate health issues in that regard, and there you go. That's just the reality. He hasn't had the benefit of playing with a roster as good as the 49ers, as good as the Rams, as good as the Eagles, as good as the Chiefs, as good as all these teams that are consistently winning. He hasn't had a roster as good as the Dallas Cowboys. He doesn't have a CeeDee Lamb. He didn't have Ezekiel Elliott in the beginning of his career. Like, he doesn't have those things. He doesn't have great defenses. He doesn't have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 all-pro, Pro Bowlers, whatever. He doesn't have those things. So you can only expect so much. Do you think Patrick Mahomes is winning Super Bowls if he was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars? Because I do not. He would have not. If he was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars, he wouldn't have gone to a single Super Bowl, let alone winning multiple Super Bowls. So I could get if you want to say that you think Trevor Lawrence should be looking better. But I think the problem is since he was really banged up, legitimately banged up at the second half of last season, as well as the Jaguars were also just injured in general, that now gives this false sense that he's worse than he really is. Let's see what he's like when he's really healthy and the team is healthy. Then we can evaluate, because he was humming along and doing great, and then everyone fell apart physically, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you all think about Trevor Lawrence? Do you think he's actually a good quarterback, or do you think he's grossly overrated, or dare I say, a bust? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.